The cockpit door clicked shut, sealing out the hum of the terminal. Rachel felt the familiar, heavy vibration through the floorboards as she pushed the throttle forward. The runway lights began to streak, merging into a singular, glowing horizon line. She pulled back on the yoke, the nose tilted toward the stars. The ground dropped away, taking the weight of the city with it. She climbed steadily, watching the altimeter tick upward until the numbers settled at 30,000 feet. Outside the reinforced glass, the world was nothing but a void of deep, ink-black velvet. She leveled the aircraft, feeling the smooth, rhythmic pulse of the engines beneath her palms. This was the moment she had spent years chasing, the exact point where the Earth became a map and the sky became a workspace. She looked out at the vast, silent expanse, the air smoothed out into a perfect, glassy stillness. There was no turbulence here, only the clean, sharp trajectory of the flight path. She had reached the altitude she had once only dreamed of from the ground, and for a long moment, she simply watched the distant, blinking lights of cities far below, savoring the silence of her success. The autopilot hummed, a steady, low-frequency vibration that filled the cabin. Rachel leaned back, but her mind drifted away from the flight path. She remembered the break room from that morning. A senior pilot had sat opposite her, tapping his phone screen with sharp, aggressive movements. He was finalizing a loan for a new luxury sedan, his voice tight as he complained about the interest rates and the crushing weight of his monthly payments. He spoke of status, of keeping up with his peers, and of the mounting debt that felt like a tether around his neck. Rachel remembered the way he had looked tired, despite the coffee in his hand. She looked down at her own tablet, currently displaying her bank balance. She earned the same salary as him. She flew the same routes, yet her screen showed a number that grew in silence, untouched by the frantic cycles of consumption he described. She watched the digits on her display, comparing his visible stress to her own quiet reality. The gulf between them was not in their income, but in their trajectory. She closed the tablet, the soft light fading, and felt the sharp clarity of her position. She was not accumulating objects, she was buying time. Rachel reached into her flight bag and pulled out a worn book. She flipped to a dog-eared page. Her finger traced the lines. Financial success requires a definite purpose. She repeated the words under her breath, letting the logic settle. She did not want the volatile highs of speculative trading or the anxiety of trying to time the market. She wanted a flight plan that worked while she slept. She opened her banking application, her thumb hovering over the configuration menu. She ignored the tabs for high-risk stocks and day trading tools. Instead, she navigated to the automated settings. With a single tap, she set a recurring transfer to trigger every time her salary hit the account. A fixed percentage, moving directly into low-cost index funds. No manual intervention. No second-guessing. No emotional adjustments. She watched the confirmation screen blink green, then closed the application. It was done. The system was now a machine running in the background of her life, indifferent to the chaos of the world below. She had traded the pursuit of immediate status for the slow, relentless compounding of capital. The rhythm was established. She set the tablet aside and returned her hands to the controls, the flight path ahead now as secure as her financial future. Seasons shifted outside the cockpit window, but Rachel's habits remained locked in place. In the crew lounge, the conversation frequently turned to new acquisitions. A pilot would gesture to a heavy, gleaming chronograph on his wrist, detailing the price tag and the wait list he had conquered to secure it. Another would talk about the latest luxury vehicle parked in the hangar lot, complaining about the insurance premiums while clearly relishing the status the model provided. Rachel listened, nodded, and said nothing. Her own wrist remained bare. She did not trade her old watch for a newer model. She did not upgrade her living space or chase the trends that consumed her peers. Every paycheck arrived, and her automated system quietly diverted the set percentage into the market before she even saw the total. It was a relentless, invisible choreography of discipline. While her colleagues spent their surplus to signal their success, Rachel poured hers into the machine she had built. She watched them chase the immediate gratification of new objects. Their focus narrowed to the present. She kept her eyes on the horizon, choosing a different kind of growth, one that did not need to be worn or displayed to be real. Her lifestyle stayed flat, a steady line that allowed her capital to accelerate in the dark, far beneath the surface of their conversations. The headlines flashed across the newsfeed in the crew room, all shouting about market corrections and sudden dips. Pilots huddled around screens, voices rising as they tracked the red arrows on the charts. Rachel walked past them, her pace unchanged. She checked her own portfolio on her phone, saw the numbers retreating, and locked the screen without a flicker of hesitation. To her, this was no different from a sudden patch of rough air in the flight path. She knew that turbulence did not mean the plane was falling. It meant the plane was moving. She sat in the cockpit, her fingers dancing over the navigation dials, her focus entirely on the horizon line ahead. She did not sell. She did not reallocate. She did not panic. When the market soared, she kept her eyes forward. When it cratered, she kept her eyes forward. She treated the global economy like the wind outside the fuselage, a constant, unpredictable force that she had learned to navigate through steady, consistent pressure on the controls. She did not need to react to every gust. She only needed to trust the trajectory she had plotted years ago. She closed her eyes for a brief second, felt the hum of the engines beneath her seat, and returned her attention to the flight deck. Her destination remained unchanged, regardless of the noise below. The market did not just dip, it collapsed. The news reached the cockpit through the junior pilot's tablet, which he kept propped against the flight manual. He kept glancing at the screen, his thumb obsessively refreshing the feed. Every time he looked, the numbers dropped further into the red. His breathing grew audible, a shallow rhythmic rasp that scraped against the quiet hum of the instrument panel. He tapped his foot against the floorboards, a frantic, uneven beat that pulsed through the small space. He wiped sweat from his forehead, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. "It is all disappearing," he muttered, his gaze darting from the altimeter to the red-line charts. He turned to Rachel, his eyes wide and searching for a reaction, a confirmation of the fear he felt. Rachel kept her hands locked on the flight controls. She felt the spike in his pulse, the frantic energy radiating from his side of the deck. Outside, the sky was clear, but inside, the air felt heavy and compressed. He reached out to adjust his own portfolio settings, his finger hovering over the sell button, his hands shaking. The cockpit felt smaller, the pressure mounting with every second. The market continued its downward spiral, turning the routine flight into a crucible of collective nerves. Rachel reached across the console and gripped the junior pilot's wrist, physically pulling his hand away from the screen. The suddenness of the movement startled him. He froze, his gaze locking onto hers. She did not look at the tablet. She did not look at the blinking red numbers. She looked directly at his eyes, her expression as steady as the horizon outside the glass. "Listen to me," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the cabin. "An aircraft stays on course because the pilot trusts the flight plan, not the wind." She released his wrist and tapped the center of the control panel, a firm, rhythmic sound that echoed in the small space. "The market is the wind. It gusts. It shifts. It tries to push you off your line. If you start chasing every gust, you will crash." She gestured toward the vast, clear blue stretching out before them. "You built a plan for a reason. You defined your destination before you ever left the ground. If you panic now, you are letting the storm dictate your flight path." She gestured for him to look out the window, away from the digital noise. The junior pilot took a long, slow breath, his shoulders dropping. His fingers stopped their frantic tapping. He looked at the horizon, then back at her, the frantic energy leaving his posture. The junior pilot remained silent, his gaze fixed on the quiet expanse of the sky. He seemed to be weighing her words, his frantic energy replaced by a heavy, thoughtful stillness. Rachel reached into her flight bag and pulled out her laptop. She set it on the pull-out tray between them and tapped the spacebar. The screen flared to life, casting a soft glow across the instrument panel. She opened the portfolio tracking software and turned the device toward him. A single, jagged line dominated the screen. It started as a flat, near horizontal crawl for the first few inches, then took a sharp, dramatic turn upward. It was not a gentle slope. It was a vertical surge, a clear, visual representation of years of consistent deposits multiplying on themselves. The junior pilot leaned in, his eyebrows raised as he tracked the curve with his finger. He looked at the historical timeline along the bottom, then back to the height of the line. The numbers were not theoretical anymore. They were a physical reality, mounting higher with every passing second of his inspection. He tapped the edge of the screen, his mouth slightly parted in surprise. He looked at Rachel, his eyes darting back to the graph, searching for the catch, but finding only the relentless mathematical truth of the line. The heavy landing gear thumped against the tarmac at Heathrow, the vibration traveling up through the floorboards and into Rachel's boots. She guided the aircraft to the gate, the engines winding down into a low, dying whine. The cabin fell silent. She waited for the crew to exit, then remained in the captain's seat, the cockpit lights reflecting off the darkened glass. She reached for the laptop resting in her bag. The screen flickered, illuminating the small, enclosed space. She navigated to the account summary, the cursor hovering over the total, 1 million. The figure sat static on the screen, a precise, black-on-white sum. She sat back, her hands resting motionless on her lap. The goal she had mapped out years ago was no longer a projection on a chart. It was a reality reflected back at her. She traced the edge of the monitor, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. A slow, steady breath filled her lungs. There was no noise in the cockpit, no alarms, no frantic chatter, just the quiet hum of the cooling systems. She looked at the number one last time, the zeros lining up in perfect, disciplined rows. She pressed the power button. The screen went black. Rachel turned her gaze toward the window. Beyond the glass, the tarmac stretched out in the dim light of the evening, empty and still. For years, every flight had been a calculated step toward this moment, a means to build a foundation that would never shift. Now, the burden of that necessity had vanished. She stood up, feeling the familiar tension in her shoulders dissipate. She was no longer bound by the relentless pressure of bills or the ticking clock of a career driven by financial survival. She walked to the flight deck door, paused, and looked back at the captain's chair. It was just a seat now, not a cage. She stepped out onto the boarding bridge, the cool night air hitting her face. She realized that she would return to the air tomorrow, and the day after that. She would navigate through the clouds and cross continents, but the reason had shifted entirely. She would fly because she loved the way the horizon looked from 30,000 feet, not because she had to buy her way into the future. The discipline of the past had purchased her the only thing that truly mattered. She had secured her own horizon, and for the first time, she was truly free to choose where it led.